Hello, once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our virtual classroom. Let's get right to it, as today we're going to be going over solving proportions using cross products. Again, as usual, I do recommend that you do pause the video at this point, copy down things, especially the heading, maybe some of the examples, and then resume it, maybe back up so you can get a better perspective. Um, that's the beauty of having this as a recording. All right. Firstly, let's address the title because it seems a bit long and a little confusing. Nevertheless, it's all things that we've done already. Specifically, the word solving means that we're dealing with equations. Proportions is just equivalent fractions, so fractions that are that may have different numbers, but the relationship between those fractions or ratios is exactly the same. So we've been working with those already. And cross products, which just means cross multiplication. So we're going to be using cross multiplication to solve proportions, to solve the missing value of a fraction. Um, so having said that, let's look at this example quickly because we've been solving proportions using what we like to call scale factors at this point. What I mean by that is if we have something like 5/4 and we have an equivalent fraction with a numerator of 10, but we do not know what the denominator is, um, there's an easy way to find out what that denominator, or x in this case, has to be. In this specific example, if we multiply 5 times 2, that gives us 10. If these are indeed equivalent, that means that the numerator and denominator have to increase by the same factor. So we have to multiply 4 by 2 as well. Notice how we're increasing it by the same factor. And so x has to equal to 8. All right, our missing variable is 8. Now, an easy way of checking to see that this is true is by using cross products, which is just cross multiplication. It simply says that if indeed uh, these two ratios, these two fractions are equivalent, if they really are equal, then the cross products, the cross multiplications have to be equal. What do I mean by that? Again, we are assuming that these two are equal. And if indeed they are equal, that means that 8 times 5, the cross multiplication, which I have right here, as well as, 8 times 5 will be equal to the other cross multiplication, which is 4 times 10. And indeed, these really are equal, as we see both of these, 4 times 10 and 8 times 5 are both equal to 40. So that is what a cross multiplication is. Now, what's cool about cross products is that we can actually use this same process to actually solve for the missing variable. What do I mean by that? Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, let's begin with that very same example that we started with at the top. So again, I encourage you to pause this as you go along so that you can take your time and copy this down. All right, so we're going to solve this for this missing value. It's the same example we did before. We know this is supposed to equal 8 because we just did it, but let's just pretend that we hadn't done it yet. Let's see what the value would be if we try to solve this using cross products. Okay, so again, we're being told that this first fraction is equal to this second fraction. So these two ratios are equal. And if indeed they are equal, then their cross products have to be equal too. Meaning, again, if these two are equal, then that means that 5 and x, or 5 times x, which is what I have right here, 5 times x, has to be the same as or equal to 4 times 10, which I have down here. Again, if these two fractions are equal, then 4 times 10 has to equal 5 times x. You know, Mr. Luba, what is x? I don't know what x is. Don't worry about it. We're going to find out. All right. We're going to be using this cross multiplication to make an equation. All right. So again, if these two really are equal, then 5 times x, or 5x, should equal 4 times 10, which we know 4 times 10 is 40. So 5x should equal 40. Again, all we did is we changed this into, using cross products, into an equation. 5x should equal to 40. Ladies and gentlemen, you should know how to solve this. This is an equation. Remember that our goal whenever we're solving equations is always to isolate the variable. We want the x to be by itself in the side of the equation that it's on. Remember, equations, there's just scales. So we have 5x on one side and we have 40 on this other side, and we know they're equal, but we don't know what x is. How do I know what x is? We need to isolate it. How do I isolate it? How do I get x by itself? Well, we're going to do the opposite of what is currently happening to it. So right here, we're multiplying 5 times x, right? The opposite of multiplying 5 times x. And notice, I'm not worried at all about the 40 right now. That's there by itself, all right? And in fact, I'm going to rewrite this just to make it as clear as possible. So again, we're working with 5x, and we're saying that that is equal to 40. All right? Again, our goal is to isolate the variable, which is found right now is here on this left side of the equation, so I'm not even going to worry about the 40. Don't worry about the 40. We'll mess with that later. Right now, let's just focus on the 5 times x. All right? How can we isolate the x? How can we get x to be all by itself? We need to get rid of this times 5. All right? How am I going to get rid of this times 5? I'm going to do the opposite operation. What's the opposite of multiplying by 5? It is to divide by 5. All right? 5 times x times 5 divided by 5. These are opposites. These actually cancel out. All right? That's 1. 5 over 5 is 1. 1 times x just leaves x by itself. So now the variable is isolated. However, ladies and gentlemen, whatever I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other side of the equation. So 40 divided by 5, and that's going to give me x, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. Notice how I got the same answer as what I got in the problem up there, meaning that both of these methods work. Both of these methods work. Now, before I move on, ladies and gentlemen, if you do not remember how to solve equations, this should be reviewed. We've been doing this for the last few months, but if for whatever reason, which is totally fine, okay, as long as you do something about it. If you have forgotten how to solve equations, it is so important that you refresh your mind. All right. Now, you have no excuse, ladies and gentlemen, because there are videos on Schoology. And in fact, I'm going to go to Schoology right now and show you exactly where they are. Okay, if you go to Schoology, let me go back. So if we go to Schoology, and now I'll go back to the main page. So we're here on the main Schoology page, and you scroll down to the green resources folder. And if you scroll down to number 30 and 31, notice how there's a video that reviews how to solve multiplication division equations. Technically, you could also go back and find the actual lessons that I did when I was talking about multiplication division equations, but you must, I'm assuming that you know how to do this. If you do not know how to solve equations, how to isolate the variable, that's something you need to review, guys, okay? You cannot afford to forget how to do that. So having said that, let's go back. So again, let me just recap everything that just happened, okay? So here we had fractions that are equivalent to one another, 2 fractions that are equivalent to one another. And because they are equivalent to one another, that means that the cross products must be equal to one another. All right. That means that x times 5, which I have right here, is going to be equal to 4 times 10, which I have right here. All right. Then I just made it simpler. 5x will equal to 40. And then I solve the equation, so I isolated the variable. So I want x to be by itself. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. On all of these problems, guys, we're going to be multiplying the variable times something, so you're always going to have to divide by that something. So since I divided by 5 to isolate the x, I must also do the same thing to the other side. Therefore, x is equal to 8. All right? So I use the cross product to make an equation, and then I solve the equation to get my variable. They both work. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to say, Mr. Lugo, I see how this is a different method, but why would I use this method when the first method that you taught us is so much easier? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the first method is not always going to be an option. All right, and we're going to see that with another example, which is over here. We have And so I want you to write this down as well. And it looks very similar, but it is indeed a different example. We have 5 over 4, same fraction that we had in the other one, is equal to 12 over a certain variable x. This time instead of a 10, we have a 12. All right, so step number 1, we always want to start off by writing the proportion. So if we had a word problem, you would want to get to this point, okay, where we have two fractions, and we are saying that they are equivalent, so they're equal, but we're missing either the denominator or the numerator of one of the fractions. Okay, so we wrote down the proportion. In fact, it was given to us already. Number 2, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to write the cross products. Okay, we're going to write an equation using the cross products. So again, these two are equal to each other. All right, and since these two are equal to each other, that means that 5 times x, the cross product, so here's where the 5x, is going to be equal to 4 times 12. 5x is going to be equal to 4 times 12. And when I do that, 5 times x is just 5x, and 4 times 12 is 48. So you can see all I did is I rewrote the cross products. 5x is right here, and then 4 times 12, the answer to that is 48. That's all I did. Now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, let us just solve the equation. In other words, we want to isolate the variable. That is always our goal. So we want the x to be by itself. I'm multiplying. I'm just going to worry about the side with the variable. It's just this side. All right. I'm multiplying x times 5. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. So I'm going to do that so that I can isolate the x. The x is now by itself. However, whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other side of the equation. So I did that to the left side, so now let me do that to the right side. 48 divided by 5, and I'm going to work that off here on the side. 48 divided by 5. 5 goes into 48 9 times, which is 45. We have a remainder of 3. We keep going. And if you forgot how to divide whenever we have decimals, meaning we don't have an exact answer, remember, we don't do remainders. Again, I highly recommend that you go onto Schoology, go to resources, and find the videos that talk about dividing with decimals. Just look at all the division ones, all right? Anyways, 48 divided by 5 will give me 9.6, ladies and gentlemen. The equivalent fraction to 5/4 with a numerator of 12 would be 12 over 9.6. X has to equal to 9.6. Awesome. Please, if you're confused, I recommend that you watch the video up till now again. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and do number 1 together. Let's go ahead and do number 1 together in Schoology, the one from our assignment. Here's another example, by the way, above number 1 that you can follow along if you can follow along with it. If not, just focus on my notes. All right, so here we have 4 9s. So in your notebook, I recommend you rewrite the problem, is equal to 10 over a variable x. Very good. So there's our proportion. There's our equivalent fractions. We know these two are equivalent. They're equal to each other. So let's write our equation using the cross product. So we're going to have 9 times 10 on one side. So 9 times 10. And on the other, we're going to have 4 times x, or 4x. And it technically doesn't matter which side you put the 4x or the 9 times 10, as long as you have both of them. So 4x on one side and 9 times 10 on the other. I like having the variable on the left side. That's just my preference. Okay, so 4x is just 4x, but we know 9 times 10 is equal to 90. So I'm just going to make this easier for us. 4x is equal to 90. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's just solve for the missing variable. All right. Let's solve for x. Let's isolate the variable. How can I get x by itself here on this left side? Well, let's get rid of this times 4. The way that I get rid of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 4. That cancels that. X is now isolated. However, whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So x will equal to whatever 90 divided by 4 is. So 90 divided by 4, let me work that off here on the side. 90 divided into 4. 4 goes into 9 twice, which is 8. Remainder 1. bring down to 0. 4 goes into 10 twice. 4 times 2 is 8. 10 minus 8 is equal to 2. All right, so we're done. So we need to put a decimal and bring down a 0. And 4 goes into 20 exactly 5 times. Ladies and gentlemen, x has to equal to 22 and 5/10. 22 and 5/10. So that would be my answer to number 1. Actually, let me show you the view that you would be looking at. There you go. So you would type in 22 and 5/10. All right, there you go. As simple as that. Simple as that. Let's do another one, just like this. Let's go ahead and do number 2 together. All right. Again, we are working with 2 equivalent fractions. So 5/2 is equal to 2 over x. I don't like how the equal sign's up here. It makes it seem like 5 and 2 are equal, but it's really the whole thing, right? So we get 5/2. 5 over 2 is equal to 2 over x. And I do recommend that you pause the video and try doing it on your own unless you're just completely lost, which is fine. Let's go ahead and do it together, assuming that you already tried it on your own. All right, so let's use the cross products. Okay, we're following our steps. If you look at your notes, we're going to write the proportion. Now we're going to write the cross products. So let's go ahead and do that. So the cross multiplications. So on one side, we're going to have 5 and x. So 5 and x. And on the other side, we're going to have 2 and 2, or 2 times 2. I would just write 4, but I want you to see exactly what it is that I'm doing. So on one side, we have 5 times x, and on the other side, we have 2 times 2. So really, a simpler way of seeing this is 5x is equal to 4. Cool. All right, from here, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and isolate the variable. Let's get x by itself. So the opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. All right, so 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1 times x is just so x is by itself. So x will have to equal, remember that whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other, whatever 4 divided by 5 is. Yes, 4, a smaller number, divided by 5. So 4 divided by 5. And if you don't know how to do this, again, I recommend you go into resources and look at the videos on how to divide whenever the dividend is larger. So 5 cannot go into 4. So I put a decimal and add a 0, but 5 can go into 48 times 5 times 8 is 40. Ladies and gentlemen, x has to be equal to 0.8. That would be my answer, 0.8. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, just follow that same pattern for each of these problems. Just cross multiply. That's going to give you each of the sides of the equation, and then just solve for the variable. Just solve for the variable. All right. In an effort to keep this video kind of short, I'm going to stop it right there. I believe on Schoology, only numbers 1 through 5 are necessary. The rest are just extra practice. But if you have more questions, I would love to go through some of these with you on your own. Just reach out to me, email me. Maybe we can make a Zoom meeting. But yes, just follow that same process. In fact, I can do the next one really quickly, just so you can see how simple these really are. Really quickly, 15 over 21 is equal to 20y. I can rewrite this as an equation by doing one side is going to have 15 and y. The other side is going to have the product of 21 times 20. And once you figure out what 21 times 20 is, which is just 420, is equal to 15y, there you go. All you do is just isolate the variable. You want the y to be by itself, so you get rid of the times 15 by dividing by 15. And there you go. Y is isolated, and you know that to get the answer, all you have to do is the same thing to the other side. 420 divided by 15, and that would give you your answer. Simple as that. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this helpful. And with that in mind, I will see you again soon.